Order. Before we begin the debate on Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, I would like to make a brief statement. I understand that there is a huge interest from the public on this matter, and there has been significant coverage in the media. It is, and always has been, possible for the House to properly debate these matters within the framework of our existing rules, and there has been no change of convention in that respect. Whilst matters relating to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's recent arrest are currently not sub judice, members will be aware that there is an ongoing police investigation. I would therefore gently say to members that it will be helpful to exercise a degree of restraint. I know the House would not wish to do anything that risks prejudicing any possible prosecution. And of course, any comments on the King or the heir apparent would also not be in order. Right, we now come to the opposition day motion on Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. No, then I think it's changed to Sir Ed Davey, a different name than I've got here. Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your statement ahead of this debate. The appalling crimes of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates have rightly stunned the whole world. The scale of Epstein's operation was shocking, selling human beings for sex, turning hundreds of young women and girls into victims and survivors. And it is those women who are at the front of our minds today as we finally seek transparency, truth and accountability. Mr. Speaker, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor shamed our country and the royal family. But for too long, members of Parliament were barred from even raising criticisms of him, let alone properly scrutinising his role as trade envoy. Because of the outdated tradition that mentions of any member of the royal family in this House must, in the words of the previous Speaker, be, and I quote, very rare, very sparing and very respectful. I encountered this firsthand back in 2011 when I was asked to respond to an adjournment debate on behalf of Lord Green, who was then the Minister for Trade and Investment. The adjournment was brought by the late Paul Flynn. But even he, an ardent and outspoken Republican, as I'm sure many of us remember, wasn't allowed to raise any actual concerns about Andrew himself. Paul called it a negative privilege, and that's what it was. He said his mouth was bandaged by archaic rules, and that had very real and damaging consequences. And I'm pleased to see the Minister in his place, because I know he was also constrained by those rules when he raised similar issues. And in that debate, Epstein's name wasn't even mentioned once. There was no chance to debate the substance. And standing in for the responsible minister, I set out the government's position as it had been for a decade, in support of the Prince's role as the trade envoy. Looking back, and knowing what we all know now, I'm horrified by it. I can't imagine what it must have been like for the survivors and their families to hear Andrew praised like that, as they heard so often all around the world. So I apologise to them, and I'm determined to change things. Mr. Speaker, I was struck by the words of Amanda Roberts, Virginia Giuffre's sister-in-law, after Andrew was arrested last week. She said this could be a stain on the royal family for the rest of our history, or, quote, it could be a moment where they and we decide that this is the time when cultural change happens. And as a staunch supporter of His Royal Highness the King and the royal family, I believe we must help to bring about that cultural change now.
Would he give way?
Happy to give way.
I'm most grateful to the leader of the Liberal Democrats for giving way. He's making a powerful speech. I'm sure we'll agree that decades of deferential, frankly sycophantic treatment by Parliament and state authorities are being exposed as having enabled Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor to behave as though he were untouchable. Yep. And I'm sure he will join me in calling on the government to introduce independent oversight of those members of the royal family who undertake official duties and require both transparency and scrutiny over anything from now on paid for by the state, because apparently they work for us.
I'm grateful for that intervention. We must build a culture of transparency and accountability. I think that is essential. And I hope we as a House will look at ending the archaic negative privilege rules Paul Flynn spoke about. Remove the bandages from our mouths. And today, free of those bandages in relation to Andrew, our motion focuses on finally getting the truth out about his role as Special Representative for Trade and Investment.
Give way?
I'll give way again.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Right Honourable Member for bringing, and his party for bringing this forward. Commend him for the way that he interviewed on TV this morning. And certainly, he doesn't just speak for this House, he speaks for this nation. And we're all greatly shocked at what has taken place, but does he agree as well? King Charles, Queen Camilla, Edward, Sophie, William, Kate are members of the royal family at this time who also need our support. And does he agree that perhaps maybe now is a time to tell them that we in this House love them, that this nation loves them, and that we understand the pain that they're suffering, and our support is with those members of the royal family who are above this and above this reproach?
I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman's intervention. I think he probably speaks for the whole House. And indeed, the intention of this debate is to bring this House together. And the changes that we think are necessary would indeed protect the royal family and strengthen the monarchy, which in some places is being criticised, and I think it's important, and that's why we need these reforms. But, Mr. Speaker, if I can go back to the motion, because it focuses at the start of this, at the appointment of the former Prince Andrew to this role back in 2001. We've seen the reporting that the King, then Prince of Wales, expressed his concerns about that appointment. More alarmingly, we have read that Peter Mandelson wrote to the then Prime Minister Tony Blair, as his former Trade Secretary, pushing for Andrew's appointment. One friend of Epstein lobbying for a job for another friend of Epstein, a job that might help Epstein enrich himself. So we clearly need to get to the bottom of that appointment and the role Mandelson himself played in it. And only the papers demanded by this motion will allow us to do that. We need them published as soon as possible, without delay. And then there are the many questions about Andrew's conduct in the role, now subject to a criminal investigation. So clearly, Mr. Speaker, as you said, we do not want to jeopardise that investigation with anything we say today. We must let the police get on with their work, especially for Epstein's victims, survivors and their families. They deserve to see justice done at last. But I would just highlight one example of the way Jeffrey Epstein sought to use Andrew's role as trade envoy to enrich himself. I'm happy to give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. My right honourable friend talks about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's role as a trade envoy. When I was working overseas for the British Council, Mountbatten-Windsor came to an exhibition that I was putting on about Dolly the sheep, which was a fine example of British scientific innovation. Mountbatten-Windsor stood up in front of Japanese dignitaries and business people and said, "This is rubbish, this is Frankenstein's sheep." Would my right honourable friend agree with me that that's a very poor example of promoting British trade interests?
Well, I'm grateful for my honourable friend's intervention. It shows that not only some of the scandals that we've heard about are things that we need to focus on, but if the trade envoy was actually speaking against British commercial interests, that raises even greater questions. And I hope not just this debate, but other debates in select committees and elsewhere will get to the bottom of that issue. But I was saying I would like to highlight one example of how Jeffrey Epstein sought to use Andrew's role as trade envoy to enrich himself. Channel 4 uncovered emails in the Epstein files in which Epstein was trying to meet the Libyan dictator Gaddafi in the dying months of the Gaddafi regime to help him find somewhere to put his money. I think something that the minister actually raised at the time. In other words, Epstein looked at the deadly crisis in Libya and saw a chance to make some money. And he thought his friend Andrew could help. And this is what it says in one of the emails. "I wondered if PA could make the intro." A few weeks later, Andrew wrote back, "Libya fixed." Though the Epstein-Gaddafi meeting doesn't appear to have happened, it does show clearly what these relationships were all about for Epstein, increasing his own wealth and power. The idea that the role of Special Trade Envoy for our United Kingdom may have been used to help him do that, to help a vile paedophile sex trafficker enrich himself, is truly sickening. And again, I want to pay tribute to the Minister who tried to raise this at the time, like his colleague, the late Paul Flynn. And it shows, again, why we need to change the rules of this House that govern the debate here and ministers. But Mr. I give way.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for giving way. I posed a question. Sorry, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. I stand corrected. The Leader of the... It's coming. I thank the Leader of the Liberal Democrats for giving way. I asked the question to the Chief Secretary yesterday in this House about the speed of bringing legislation forward. Victims, members of the House, members of the Lords, we all need this process to be done as swiftly as possible. I just wonder if you agree that whatever happens with Andrew or anybody else, that you also agree that the Chief Secretary's comments that we do need to bring this forward and that we need to keep pushing to get legislation swiftly, not in years to come.
Well, I'm grateful for the Honourable Gentleman's intervention, both for his Freudian slip and indeed for his suggestion that we do need to speed up action in this area. But if I can begin to conclude, Mr. Speaker, in many ways this is the first truly global scandal, from the White House in Silicon Valley to Oslo and Paris. But it's also a deeply British scandal, reaching right to the top of the British establishment. Because can there be many people more symbolic of the rot that eats away at the British establishment than the former Duke of York and Special Trade Envoy, and the former Business Secretary, First Secretary of State, and Ambassador to the United States? Their association with Epstein and their actions on his behalf, while trusted with the privilege of public office, are a stain on our country. Today we must begin to clean away that stain with the disinfectant of transparency. Because whether it is the President of the United States and his Commerce Secretary, or Peter Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, or Epstein himself, their victims and survivors have seen those responsible evade accountability and escape justice for far too long. I desperately hope, that is ending now, and I hope the House will approve this motion.
The question is, as on the order paper, I call the Minister, Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear from the outset, we support this motion today. Frankly, it is the least we owe the victims of the horrific abuse that was perpetrated by Jeffrey Epstein and others. The abuse that was enabled, aided and abetted by a very extensive group of arrogant, entitled and often very wealthy individuals in this country and elsewhere. It's not just the people who participated in the abuse, it's the many, many more who turned a blind eye out of greed, familiarity or deference. To my mind, they too were complicit, just as complicit, and I welcome the reckoning that is coming to them now. I doubt there is anyone in this House who is not shocked and appalled by the recent allegations. Colleagues and many civil servants have told me their own stories of their interactions with Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor, and they all betray the same pattern. A man on a constant self-aggrandising and self-enriching hustle. A rude, arrogant and entitled man who could not distinguish between the public interest, which he said he served, and his own private interest. I remember him coming to visit the Sea Cadets in Tonypandy. They were absolutely delighted and excited to meet a member of the royal family. But he insisted on coming by helicopter, unlike his mother, who came twice to the Rhondda and always came by car. He left early and he showed next to no interest in the young people. That is, of course, Mr. Speaker, not a crime, nor is arrogance, fortunately, I suppose. Of course, we knew much of this, much of what is now in the public domain, actually a very long time ago. And I say very gently, it is all very well for some of us to say, if only we had known then what we know now, but I'm afraid that with me that doesn't wash. We did actually have plenty of warning. I called on the then Prime Minister David Cameron to dispense with the services of the then Duke of York in this chamber on the 28th of February 2011 because of his close friendship with Saif Gaddafi, as has just been referred to, and the convicted Libyan gun smuggler Tariq Kaitouni. I was rebuked by Speaker Bercow then for doing so because references to members of the royal family should be very rare, very sparing and very respectful. I didn't disagree with the ruling of Mr. Speaker, nor would I ever, as you know, Mr. Speaker, disagree with the ruling from the chair. I heard that. Over the next few days... I'm taking your advice, Mr. Speaker. I'm just ignoring that. Over the next few days, back in 2011, I repeatedly called for Andrew to be sacked in the public domain on television, on radio and in newspaper articles, citing his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the mysteriously excessive £15 million cost paid for his Sunning Hill home and many other issues besides. I'm afraid the willful blindness of far too many at that time was absolutely spectacular, and it still angers me. The then Prime Minister, the then Home Secretary and many others in government defended Andrew time and time and time again. I was repeatedly told off, both in the chamber and outside the chamber. John Humphreys, the broadcaster, actually told me on the Today programme on the 7th of March, I think honourable members will be shocked by this, that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't quite a paedophile, drawing a distinction between sexual abuse of prepubescent and other children. Dominic Lawson, writing in the Sunday Times on the 11th of March, defended Andrew and made the same distinction between Epstein's involvement with teenage girls and paedophilia, since, as he put it, none of the girls was prepubescent, although he did at least admit that both were sordid and exploitative. I gently suggest that that is the least of what we have seen. So let me be absolutely clear. All of this happened after the photograph of Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre was published in the Mail on Sunday on the 27th of February 2011. It is after the allegations, not before. Well, I'll give a word there and then to the end.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving way, and I entirely agree with him in relation to the abhorrence of the comments that were in the media back then. But does he also agree with me that we still have a degree of that problem now, that often in the media we talk about underage girls, where actually what we're talking about is children? And does he agree with me that we should be ensuring that when we talk about Epstein's crimes, we talk about the children that were involved?
100%, and I think we should also be referring to statutory rape, because that is what it is. And statutory rape is no better than any other kind of rape. It is rape. End of story.